hello, good morning, and a very warm welcome to Arup's 7th year of participating in Green Sky Thinking. My name is Farah, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Leader for Buildings London. Our theme for this year is Cities for People. Through our work, we help to design some of the most beautiful buildings in the world. And indeed, 8 of these, where we contributed engineering designs, received REBA awards on Tuesday night, namely Gasholders London and Exhibition Road Quarter V&A, including some others. These sublime buildings, of course, shaped our cities. As we all know, there are so many stories we can tell, and our challenge, as always, is how to tell a great story. So what do the experts say? In Harvard Business Review, Nick Morgan of PowerQs states, "In our information-saturated age, business leaders will not be heard unless they are telling stories." Nick goes on to say, facts and figures and all the rational things we think are important in the business world actually do not matter. It's actually the stories that create the sticky memories by attaching emotions to the things that happen. So with this in mind, we have 11 stories that our wonderful lineup of speakers will share. We've all been curating and rehearsing, and we are all challenged with telling our stories within 3 minutes each. So without further ado, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Mike Bevan, who is one of our loveliest directors here at Arup. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we live in fascinating times, and our thoughts and considerations embracing a huge range of ideas, concepts, and increasing knowledge base increasing all the time. As a designer in the built environment, I'm an engineer, I like to look at life through 2 lenses, really at the people and the planet aspects of what we do. So with people, it's success for our clients, success for people who occupy our buildings, health, wellness, an increasingly scientific base of understanding of those concepts. But also going into community, so reaching out across the city into communities, and our responsibilities to planet, of course. And again, a very strong aspect of green thinking, green sky thinking, is thinking about our impact and the opportunities of working within a planetary environment. We're working on the planetary boundaries. This is from 2009, this particular piece of work, where scientists have identified 9 aspects of critical tipping point that we may consider, quite controversially in the scientific world, I have to say, but it isn't everything these days, consider how we might limit our sort of impacts and our flows in and out of the planet. This is actually from 2009. This shows 2 aspects. Now climate change has moved into the red zone of tipping point as we go past our CO2 concentrations. But a piece of work we're leading to also look at, can we then set scientific targets for cities? What are the limits, the boundary limits for cities, and how can we then understand how we can build, how we can construct, how we can occupy, live, and sustain an increased city-dwelling environment? So how do we do this as designers and engineers? Well, we might design buildings. This building was actually designed completely in timber. It was designed in timber for speed. It was designed and constructed in a year, less than a year. Normally it'd take 2 years to do this process. But as a consequence, it actually absorbed more carbon than it took to build it. Even though some components are aluminium, the timber has embodied this stuff. So can we think of these ways of designing and implementing, taking action to reduce our impact, our cities' boundaries, to look at the scientific limits of what we can do? So we need tools to do this, and in a really fascinating age, we have increased computing power, increased technology to help us to gather knowledge, gather data, and again, establish what these boundaries might be. Part of this is working in cities and breathing, so sensors located in the city to inform, engage people in this important topic for city dwelling. This activity in King's Cross to engage the public in what the actual measurements are at street level in the built environment. And of course, embracing technology like artificial intelligence and machine learning, something we're very active in. And it's interesting how these very, very narrow pieces can add together to give a more comprehensive understanding of what we're doing and what we do in the future, how we then look forward. So an example is when we're actually controlling tight control conditioning of a gallery, this is the V&A, where artificial intelligence is tracking what's happening day in, day out, and then predicting when pulses of people are going to come in, when things are going to happen, so that the systems can use less energy to keep these tight control conditions. So again, using these tools to reduce our impact looking forward. But also using AI in the urban environment. This is a piece of work, obviously Primrose Hill, but this is looking at urban environment where we can use topography, and we're using AI to scan images of cities and around cities to control flooding. So we're using the topology, using AI to identify where we can use topology, not have to build more dams, higher walls, more civil infrastructure, using natural topology to actually control and limit flooding. I'm not proposing, again, Primrose Hill is one of those, but it's this idea of mapping, using images and AI to then look forward to how we use tools to limit our impact and to embrace what we have around us as a natural tool. This guy is absolutely amazing guy. He was working in Silicon Valley in the late 80s, and in 1988 he coined a phrase, ubiquitous computing, where everything, all around us we have sensors, computers and chips doing work and working in the background. But also, another phrase, calm technology. And this is decades before the rest of us become used to sensors and things all around us. So I think it's irony that his quote in the background, he has absolutely the best idea what will be. So on that inspiring note, with Mark's words, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning. I'm Mike Thompson, and this morning I'm going to give you a snapshot of some of the work we've been doing down at Broadgate by Liverpool Street Station in the city. Broadgate is the largest pedestrianised area in central London, and we're proud to be supporting British Land and GIC in a 10-year redevelopment programme. Originally designed as something of a fortress in the 1980s in response to the surrounding area at the time, Broadgate is now very much looking outwards and inviting people in, especially from Crossrail and from the emerging tech hubs to the north. So in response to that, our master planning team have been helping to develop a strategy for creating the required linkages across the estate and specifically concentrating on enlivening the public spaces. Because what our cities are demanding these days is not just office space, but destinations, places where life and work can interact. So one of those public spaces is actually inside one of our buildings. Here, our environmental physics team have been using CFD modelling to understand how you might heat and cool the atrium of the office space when where the doors are always open to provide this indoor public square. At that same building, at 1 Finsbury Avenue, we're embracing the premise that buildings which are no longer fit for purpose, existing buildings that is, do not necessarily need to be demolished. And this concept of building reuse is not something that is only appropriate for heritage buildings, but when applied to a wide range of building types, there are potential huge benefits in cost, in programme, and in construction, noise, and pollution reduction. At Broadgate, that's been particularly relevant due to the scale of concurrent development that's occurring. And it's easy to see how that would be extrapolated on a city scale for potentially very large benefits. So, for example, this means doing things like adding new roof terraces on the existing building, where previously there was only provision for lightweight maintenance access. We've solved that challenge here by detailing new steelwork integrated with the existing, designed to drag the extra load back into the centre of the building, where we had calculated and analysed that there was sufficient spare capacity to accommodate it, and also avoiding working near the existing listed facade. At the same building, we've been retrofitting smart building technology to the existing central plant systems and devising ways to do this, but perhaps as importantly, devising ways to communicate the challenges of the digital age and all of its acronyms to clients and to others. Elsewhere at Broadgate, at Exchange Square here, we're in the early design stages of transforming this existing space into a brand new green park for the city and for Broadgate. And we're enabling that by back analysing the capacity of the existing transfer deck over the railway lines that actually supports this existing space. Previously, a few years ago at Broadgate Circle, we cantilevered new lightweight floor area onto the existing structure on a very constrained site. And this not only added valuable new lettable area, but it also provided a vibrant new public space for Broadgate. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alice Blair, and I'm going to talk to you about V&A Exhibition Road building. This opened to the public in June of last year and is the most significant development of the V&A South Kensington campus for over 100 years. And it's been incredibly well received by the public since that opening. The V&A sits on the corner of Cromwell Road and Exhibition Road. And Exhibition Road is one of the UK's most visited streets. Millions of tourists visit the fantastic museums of South Kensington every year. But on this side of the museum, the V&A had really inadequate entrances a few years ago. There were doors and steps and barriers to entry, so it didn't attract a lot of the visitors that come to the area. ALA's competition-winning scheme for this project was to blur the boundaries of what is inside and outside of the museum to create a new entrance from Exhibition Road into the heart of the V&A. And these simple diagrams really communicate what it meant to actually bring the public in from the road through a new courtyard into the museum. Of course, the reality can be somewhat more complex than the diagrams might initially suggest. We were presented with a complicated site full of existing buildings and full of services that had built up over 150 years, a kind of hangover from its original purpose, providing boilers and hot water to the museum. Our services engineers designed enabling works to divert, move, and understand what everything was doing and where it could go, so that the construction of the project could happen without any interruptions to the V&A's operations. Our accessibility consultants worked tirelessly with the architects to develop a profile for this new courtyard that dealt with the complicated changes of levels across the site and really provided a new accessible entrance that hadn't been there previously. And structurally, we managed to integrate a cheeky mezzanine underneath this space, adding valuable floor area for the museum. And of course, underneath this is the new gallery that is providing 1,100 square metres of new temporary exhibition space for the V&A Museum. And to maximise the area of this gallery, we had to work incredibly close to the listed buildings around the perimeter. We were piling within 300 millimetres at times, and we had to ensure that in doing this work, we weren't going to cause excessive ground movements or vibrations that might endanger the museum's buildings and its collection. An excavation was also proceeding in very close proximity to the museum, and we understood all the ground movements that might happen to ensure that this building was safe to proceed. In the Grade 1 listed Western Ranges building, we demolished more than 50% of the load-bearing walls to create much-needed new circulation space in the new entrance. And the Aston Webb screen that had for years been a barrier to entry, but also something that hid all of those horrible buildings in the courtyard behind, and was transformed into a beautiful colonnade that really lets visitors in easily from Exhibition Road. This project has really blurred the boundary of what a building even means. It really totally transforms the V&A's position in South Kensington. It almost changes how you get into the museum and what it is to visit. And I leave you with this quote from the RIBA London judges in awarding this project the Building of the Year 2018. Every once in a while, an architect, a site, and a client work seamlessly together to create a special moment in the city. The new courtyard, cafe, shop, and gallery of the Exhibition Road Quarter is such a place in time. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Nina McCallion. I'm a structure engineer, and I'm going to talk to you about 65 Davis Street. 65 Davis Street is an overstation development at the new Crossrail Bond Street station. Large railway projects such as Crossrail are vital to a vibrant city as London, but they are expensive. And overstation developments such as 65 Davis Street can provide large funds toward funding these large projects. 65 Davis Street is the 6-story high-end office in the heart of Mayfair for Grosvenor Developments. What we've, together with PLP Architects, what we've managed to do is to link major civil works in a very chic, high-end, pretty Mayfair. On the left is the Crossrail station, and what you can see is that most of the ground floor will be occupied by the station. Once the OSD complete, it will look at one building, but that is quite an effort to achieve. So together with PLP Architects, we managed to get value and space out of this very constrained site. I could talk to you about endless modeling, careful coordination with building services, how to build on top of a live station. But today I'm going to talk to you about the work that we did with our acoustic engineers. The aim of this office is to provide a superb internal office space suitable for Mayfair high-end office. And early on we were aware, of course, that there might be some noise and vibration issues with the associated tunnels and also the tunnel vents that venting the new Crossrail tunnels. So a simple diagram to explain that. There's the tunnel fence on the left, there is the existing Jubilee tunnels where the noise could go through the new Crossrail box, and the provided solution, which is acoustic isolation of the OSD, which basically means that the whole building is sit on top of little springs, bearings at the interface. We started in 2013 with identifying the problems, and we mapped a gradual process of de-risking the project by either designing out the problem or by validating by doing on-site testing. And we started with looking at the noise from the tunnels coming through the box. And as soon as the box was built, so as soon as the Crossrail tunnels and the basement box were built, we went on site and we took measurements of the tunnels going through the noise and validating our acoustic analysis. This then was played back to the client. So also in the basement of this building, we have what we call the sound lab, and it's basically a space where you can play back scenarios of noise levels. So rather than talking about decibels, we were able to translate it into the more comprehensible world of hearing. So the client could just sit and hear what it is to hear a train passing by, what that means if people walk by, if that is masked by mechanical ventilation. And that made the decision to introduce acoustic isolation a very simple one. Once we decided for acoustic isolation, we had to detail that and analysis that. If you think of bearings as a squidgy material, that's basically what it is. It takes the damping out of any vibration. As a structure engineers, we like to hold on to our building. And the station is our foundation, so we want rigid connections. Acoustic engineer wants something floppy, squidgy. So there was a bit of a fine-tuning to find the right balance and the stiffness of these bearings. And to do that, we engaged with specialist acoustic bearings, because these are very bespoke products, to get their data and to really understand what that was. They also helped us to really develop these very complex details. So that's just a very simple column base plate that turned into these complicated details. The final step will be in our process. We've got a design, we are happy with the noise level. The final step will be to validate the noise levels of the tunnel vents, which will happen in September. And then we can't wait to start construction early next year and to build our overstation development. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Angela, and today I'm going to talk to you about Television Centre. Television Centre was home of the BBC from the 1960s, and it's a cultural icon. It was affectionately dubbed the Dream Factory. It's also architecturally significant, which led to its Grade 2 listing. But despite its cult status, it was never actually accessible to the public. And by 2012, it was at the end of its useful first life, badly in need of upgrading. So this led to a unique opportunity to preserve a cultural icon and landmark by stimulating regeneration of a lost area of the city and transforming a previously private site into a place that everybody could come and enjoy. It's a large, complex project, 13 acres of brownfield site, comprising new build and refurbishment to create a mixed-use development of offices, culture, leisure, homes and TV studios. Arup was responsible for the multidisciplinary engineering of all aspects of the site. And really, it honestly was our ability to collaborate on that led to the opportunity to deliver real value in overcoming the technical challenges on the project. As you can imagine, with a project of this size, there's a whole multitude of stories that we can share with you. But today I want to focus on one very tiny but significant aspect. Placemaking is central to the success of this project. And we realised that celebrating the heritage of this site and the buildings was integral to creating a new destination that would really have heart and soul. The planning process placed the onus on the client to identify all of the cultural heritage aspects, and so Arup stepped up to lead in the classification and conservation of those. The Piper mural, a large mosaic by artist John Piper and centrepiece of the main entrance hall, is arguably one of the most important cultural aspects and heritage aspects, and it was definitely the most technically challenging to solve. Our heritage, structural and geotechnical teams put our heads together to understand this piece of art and use our knowledge to define a methodology for preserving the Piper mosaic during demolition and construction works. We were planning to demolish everything highlighted red, immediately adjacent to the Piper mosaic, which is highlighted green in this image. And demolition activities cause ground-borne vibrations and movements. So we thought it would probably be best if we just took the mural down for a few years. But unfortunately, we discovered that actually that would not be possible. The individual glass tesserae, which are all very brittle, were stuck immediately onto the building structure with weak, brittle grout. So this meant that as the structural components started to move, stresses would be induced in the mosaic, and that might cause cracking in the grout and then tiles to ping off. So we worked together to research the history of materials from the time that this was designed and built, and then to analyse the expected movements that the activities on site were going to cause. From this, we analysed the expected impact on the mosaic and put a mitigation process in place to protect it during those works. So we applied phase protection to try and hold it all together, and we invoked a series of movement monitoring processes with trigger levels and activities in place if any of those were exceeded. And after a nail-biting couple of years on site, the mosaic is just the other side of that wall. We're pleased to say that it's now been given a spring clean and again takes pride of place in the main reception, which has just been newly opened. Television Centre truly is a brilliant project. It is enormous and there are lots of stories that we could tell. But the heritage aspect is just one example of how we delivered value, not only to our client, but also to the city, because it's the public that's going to get to enjoy this building for years to come.
Good morning, my name's Mel Elwood and I'm here today to talk to you about a project that we've been working on with Zaha Hadid Architects since 2009 and completed last year. It's the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies Research Centre in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, affectionately known as CAPSARC. As per their website, the facility aims to be a preeminent global research centre for energy economics, policy, technology and the environment. The building's primary function is to house technical specialists in energy, generating new ideas and innovations in the field. This is something that is getting right means many things, but I'd like to focus on one aspect today. How can we use the building design itself to foster collaboration? Our experience in the science and technology sector tells us that we need to generate chance encounters. We need to design spaces that encourage people to linger, to mingle, to share ideas and foster collaboration. So the question is, how can we make a big campus feel small? These are lofty ideals, but they have to contend with an exceptionally hot, dry Riyadh climate. Temperatures reach 50 degrees C in the hottest months, climates that people avoid, not linger in. And we had a pretty tough sustainability target as well. Our LEED Platinum target meant we could not rely on energy-intensive cooling strategies to achieve comfort criteria. Bit of a problem. So we started by identifying available natural resources. The windrows that you can see at the top here highlights that there are periods with cooling winds, and the psychrometric chart on the right shows that there are times of the day and times of the year when the outdoor temperatures remain pleasant. In response, these sketches from early design stages show the cell structure beginning to emerge. The cells have openings to the north to capture the spring wind, and more protected aspects to the east, to the south and to the west, where the sun comes from. Each cell surrounds a courtyard, shaped to provide shaded, cooler spaces where people can meet, gather, talk and share. You can see the cells here in this developing model of the campus. They're arranged together in swarms, forming buildings. Research centre, conference centre, masala, etc. The spaces between the buildings are protected by this canopy here, providing shelter. Here is some analysis we used early on to try and establish the best shape and orientation for these cells. The aim here was to explore two key aspects that control the impact of user experience, balancing the quality of daylight with control of solar gain. It's more than just shape, it's colour as well. The bright white fabric used for the canopy helps to reflect the sun, helping keep the spaces below cooler. Balancing daylight and solar gain drove the design of the facade too, informing the irregular distribution of windows across the envelope. Here again, you can see that the shape of the building itself provides self-shading. How does it work in practice? The view here is from within one of the courtyards to get a sense of scale. And here again, looking down into those courtyards, shaded, vegetated spaces, protected from the glare of the sun by the shape and configuration of the buildings. This was also fundamental to the energy strategy, helping the project achieve LEED Platinum at completion. Here, the canopy spaces between the buildings. They're much larger, with the high fabric structure providing a shifting pattern of light and shade between the buildings to encourage people to walk between the buildings and bump into each other. These are spaces that feel comfortable all year round. And here is my favourite courtyard. It's not intrinsically better than any of the others, but last spring, after 10 long years of design and construction, I got a lovely call from the architect as they were finishing construction. He was ringing to tell me that he'd come into the courtyard for an impromptu meeting and he could feel the spring wind tumbling into the courtyard, just like the sketches we'd made a decade before. These are the things that get us out of bed in the morning, understanding that we can make simple interventions in design that make the places that we produce happier for people to be in. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Claire Perkins, a materials scientist with about 20 years of experience of applying materials sustainability to projects. Healthy and safe construction materials have become a particular focus as health and well-being has risen up the building design agenda. In the creation of cities for people, the inhabitants' health and well-being must be central to the project. Good quality air is fundamental to this. Poor air quality kills. 5.5 million people died prematurely in 2013 due to household and outdoor air pollution. Although more than half the deaths occur in two of the world's fastest growing economies, China and India, even in the UK, about 28,000 people die annually from the effects of particulates in the air. And the poor air quality in London causes between 7.6 and 8.3% of all deaths, depending on the borough that you live in. Whilst particulates and gases such as nitrogen dioxide and sulfur dioxide are from outdoor sources, indoor air quality is still a concern, and NICE is in the process of developing guidelines for indoor air quality at home. Now imagine you've just moved into this newly refurbished space. Your interior designer has carefully selected the finishes to look great and enhanced different ways of working, and even installed a plant. What you can't see is the cocktail of pollutants emitted from all these pristine materials. They are sealants and adhesives, wall coverings, ceiling tiles, timber board products, floor finishes, and furniture. These are the ones to concentrate on in order to improve indoor air quality by identifying lower emitting products. This is a project we worked on for Stanhope with architects AHMM and the main contractor Mace. We drafted a project strategy for the interior finishes to enable best practical options of materials to be identified. The process required balancing the best-in-class classifications with the practicality of sourcing them in the UK. We reviewed architect-specified materials and identified lower emission finishes that complied with the strategies. We drafted specification clauses and tender documentation to enable the requirements to be adopted by Mace and their subcontractors. This process enabled the team to make extensive reductions in VOC content and emissions in the finishes. We were able to make reductions in emissions from paints, sealants, floor finishes, timber boards and partitions. Thank you for listening.
Katie Wood. I take a lead on health and wellbeing. And what I'd like to do today is tell you the story, my story, of how I got into this, why I'm passionate about this topic, and how all of us working in the built environment can make a difference to people's health and wellbeing. So for the last 15 years, I've worked almost exclusively on healthcare projects in various places around the world, Australia, Canada, the UK, and various stops in between. Within healthcare, it's been accepted for a long time that the environment a patient is treated in can have quite a significant effect on their health outcomes. The Centre for Health Design in the US has led on this body of evidence for the last 25 years, and we're able to identify what aspects of the design really do have an effect on outcomes. In other sectors, although evidence is growing and being gathered, it doesn't yet exist to this degree and isn't as widely accepted. However, focusing on the sick is really only a small part of a population's health and well-being, and I've long wanted to widen the scope of what I do into the positive side of the equation, if you like. So I made the first steps on this journey when I was working in Australia, and we started looking at the ways in which a large healthcare project can influence the local community in which it's located, and go far beyond its primary scope of healthcare. And these are cartoons from various workshops that we had at the time. I got back to the UK in February 2016. I've been away for 9 years, and an awful lot had changed in the meantime. The WELL standard had been launched, and it had captured the attention of building owners, occupiers and developers, and the public is now an awful lot more conscious about health and wellbeing, for example, through the impacts of poor air quality that you've just been hearing about, modern lifestyles and our ageing population. Plus, the widening health inequalities in our society are becoming a real political imperative. In addition, there's the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are for all countries and have been committed to extensively. And you'll notice that good health is the third one after eradicating poverty and hunger. I realise now, the time was right to seize the moment. So over the last year, we've identified a series of areas where we can contribute to this rapidly developing body of knowledge, and we hope make a difference to people's health and well-being. These are areas where across Europe we're working together, engaging with others, and we'll be sharing much more information over the coming months and years. It's important to emphasise that none of these ever work in isolation. They're pretty much all interrelated, and focusing on just one aspect of health and well-being within urban planning or design is actually likely to lead to unintended consequences. So, in summary, this is what gets me out of bed in the morning: the challenge of integrating a set of specialist skills to address really complex problems. And when I know that in so doing I'm potentially improving people's lives in one of the most basic ways possible, then I really do feel good about my work.
Good morning, my name's Emily Wooderson. I'm a landscape architect with 10 years experience in urban greening from concept design through to delivery. And today I'm going to talk to you about Wild West End. Evidence suggests that access to green space has been shown to improve our physical, mental health and well-being, as well as the environment, from improving local air quality through to supporting better social cohesion. However, while these benefits are widely recognised, we're still some way from realising the full potential of urban greening in our cities. One of the main challenges I see in holding us back is collaboration. Bringing together the right people within a project team or at an organisational or regional scale to solve problems and inspire change. At an organisational level, partnerships have a part to play, particularly ones that include like-minded partners who share the same end goals, one vision, and an agreed framework for working together. It is from this basis that Wild West End was born, a unique partnership between the Crown Estate, Grosvenor Britain and Ireland, the Portman Estate, the Howard de Walden Estate and Shaftesbury. These West End property owners are working together to demonstrate the positive impacts of urban green infrastructure and enhance biodiversity and ecological connectivity in this iconic area of London. This year, we also welcome Great Portland Estates as a sixth partner, extending the reach of this collaboration. Arup plays the role of technical partner to Wild West End, facilitating and steering the partnership, as well as providing technical expertise. We work alongside our strategic partners, the GLA and London Wildlife Trust, to drive this initiative forward. The partners have committed to work together to share information and raise awareness of the benefits of urban greening. They're currently installing new green space and improving existing ones. Baseline monitoring was undertaken 2 years ago to understand the functional value of the green space that exists and the wildlife inhabiting these areas. And we will be repeating the monitoring this summer to track our progress. Delivering green space in cities can be complex due to the constraints of urban developments. Challenges such as conservation areas, spatial and access requirements, and installation costs require careful planning and innovative design to overcome. Within the design context, early collaboration is key to delivering green space. Considering the functional benefits of urban greening, such as the economic, social, and environmental values, can help to root green space design within the core sustainability objectives of a development. Through early coordination between the client, architect, landscape architects, and engineers, holistic and cost-effective solutions can be sought to optimize green space functionality and often enhance the performance of the building. In doing this, the Wild West End partners are tackling issues such as establishing good practice in design specification and contractor competencies, balancing competing space demands, and overcoming the challenges of retrofit for planned maintenance and monitoring. I'm excited to see where we take Wild West End next. Now that the partnership is established, there's opportunity to work together to address other sustainability issues, such as waste, air quality, and local skills and employment. Urban greening is rising up the agenda, and with this comes the potential for future collaboration. There is strong commitment towards urban greening in the Draft London Environment Strategy and the Draft London Plan, and now London itself is looking to become the first national park city. Thank you.
Morning all. My name is Xterra. I'm a structural engineer and I work here in London in the buildings design team. And I'm going to talk to you about these old gas holder frames at King's Cross. Now there are 4 of these and you can see them here in these photos enjoying their new life, playing a role of the contexts for a beautiful new public park, some fantastic new apartment blocks. And each of those has its own interesting story, but I'm going to tell you about the backstory of these frames. So a bit of context first. King's Cross Central, this is the regeneration of the old industrial sites north of King's Cross and St Pancras. It's by the developer Argent. They've done a fantastic job. This whole place is a masterclass in developing around tricky things like live railway assets and delicate heritage structure. And of course, all within a sort of a complex web of stakeholder involvement and public scrutiny. And the story of the gas holder frames is a nice thread within the overall story. It's a story about teamwork and strategy and coming together to create new urban space without deleting old urban space. The story starts in 1880 when these 4 frames were first constructed, first erected. And here's a different angle. So the gas industry at the time was a very powerful one. It was an exciting new industry, a new grid utility provided to the homes and places of work around the town, much like the tech industry today, in fact. And it enjoyed enormous investments and, of course, employed some of the greatest technical minds of the day. And they're very clever things, these storage devices. They're essentially enormous metal drums, open on one end, the open end turned down, and they're dropped into a pool of water. And the gas is stored in this space above the water. And if you use more gas than you make, the drum sinks down. And if you make more gas than you use, the drum rises up. But to stop that from happening, the engineers built these enormous frames, and they're magnificent structures. They're 8 stories tall. They were fabricated to precision in wrought iron and cast iron, tricky materials, and they were erected using horses, ropes, and pulleys. No mean feat. So not just beautiful inside, they're also beautiful in detail. You can see the care and pride that went into these things. And of course, a big deal was made of them at the time, promotional shots and this kind of thing. And they came to represent and define the neighbourhood, forever appearing in the backdrops of photos and appearing in movie sets. And they were awarded, quite rightfully so, Grade 2 status. And in fact, they remained in active service for 120 years, which is pretty impressive. And they were finally decommissioned in 2001 when construction of the new international station at St Pancras began. You can see here, in fact, that 3 of them sit where the station now sits. So they were dismantled and they were stored temporarily next to the 4th last standing gas holder frame. And the restoration and reuse of all 4 of these frames became a condition for planning that was taken on by the King's Cross Central development. So this last gas holder frame that stood right there was frustrating the master plan, and also there was concern that it would lose dominance over the landscape to the new buildings that were being built around it. So Ardent needed to convince Camden of the merit of moving that gas holder frame, and also needed to convince Camden that the right amount of attention and devotion to the heritage aspects of the whole site was in place. And so to that end, they asked us to help them develop a strategy for the reuse of these old frames. Now, there is no record of how these were designed to work, and it wasn't obvious how they would behave once they were re-erected. So we developed a series of studies and a series of analyses, and through steady refinement of our assumptions, and by bringing into the conversation one of the few specialist contractors in the country with the right skills for the job, we were gradually able to come to sort of converge on a commercially viable strategy whereby the cost of structural repairs was confined only to the members of the frames that were critical for stability, and this helped offset the cost of general conservation repairs. And not only was it commercially viable, but it also gave Camden reassurance that the right expertise was in place for the job and that the right devotion was there. And in fact, ultimately they agreed that all 4 frames could be relocated to the north end of the site, enabling the master plan. Now these frames now stand restored and re-erected, and what's more, they stand in a new location where they can remain a striking and dominant feature of the landscape for years to come. Thanks very much.
Hi there, I'm Eike Sindlinger. I'm an urban designer in the integrated city planning team. And I want to talk to you today about how to connect infrastructure with people to create really exciting places. Infrastructure, the word means actually structure from below, so it should never be the dominant thing. And it's a relatively new thing. It came up in the 19th century, usually as a response to crises, like the Great Stink in London, when Bazalgette converted or created the sewer system for London instead of the Thames being an open sewer. Or they've been driven by entrepreneurship, like the railway companies like here building St Pancras Station. So over the 100 years, I think we got very good with infrastructure, solving specific issues, like here building the Westway, addressing traffic problems in London. But I think you can already sense there might be problems with that because it has unintended consequences. Now, take for instance stormwater drains. They're really great if you want to race a car and impress Olivia Newton-John, like in the movie Grease, but they're pretty bleak if how they separate communities. And when they're not in use for stormwater, they just collect dust and rubbish. And to add insult to injury, this is the Chongcheng River in Seoul. You quite often put a highway on top of a stormwater drain or a river. Now, if this is the logical answer, as a designer who's passionate about places, I really have to say, did we ask the right questions? And the obvious answer is no, because that's the same river today, still performs as a river with stormwater drain, but it also is a public park, an amenity for culture, it cools the city, and it's a huge visitor attraction for the whole place, and the traffic still flows. So obviously, when you add multiple issues to the thing, you get a place and you get a better solution. Now here's a project I worked on when I want to show how you do this in real life. This is the HS2 interchange station near Birmingham Airport. There's Jaguar Land Rover and the NEC, and it's about a development around this major railway station. Now, if you leave my friends, the engineers, to their own devices, just following a brief, following a brief to deliver a perfect solution, this is a fantastic solution, but it's not a great place for people. So I think we need to think bigger and turn this into something great. And here's my 7-step plan how to do this. First, you have to really identify the bigger opportunity. You have to think about this is in a very central location in the UK, 37 minutes from Manchester and London, probably one of the most exciting development opportunities there is today, and it can deliver an awful lot of good economic outcomes. Secondly, you have to work with all the stakeholders around to develop a shared vision what that place should look like and what it could be. Then you have to coordinate what the stakeholders have planned in the area. And you can see there is a lot going on, but most importantly, you have to work out when the decision points are and what impact they might have later on, so everyone can see, oh my God, if I'm doing this, that might be the impact. Once you've done that, you can chunk up the plan in phases. 5 steps in this case, starting from now. And you can work out how much investment you need at each stage and what can be delivered at each stage. Then you go and draft a framework plan around this. Give it some detail so it brings the place really together and it connects all those places. Then you can go and lobby to government for funding. You have the tools because you can demonstrate what the benefits are and how little money it costs. Once you've got support for that, you can start promoting to investors. And that helps you then turning this into something more like this, which is a much more exciting place for people formed around landscapes. And coming back to the beginning, I did Bazalgette a bit of unfairness here, just saying like he was just solving the cholera issue. He actually developed a very complex system along the River Thames, which is called the embankment, dealing with a lot of issues like railways, sewage and the like, which fundamentally transformed how London relates to its river. And it creates a situation which we still continue to enjoy and change. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Becky Taylor and I'm leading the city's thinking in our buildings team, and I'm going to sum up. So you've just heard some really great stories about how we can influence people's experience of the city in so many different ways and at a really dizzying range of scales, from the engineering that enables new places to welcome people in or shapes climate, right into the specification of our ceilings to keep us healthy, and back up to using a really, really hands-on approach to engineering to enable us to enjoy and live amongst our amazing heritage. And what's so great about these stories, what spoke to me so much, was the range of different experts we can bring together to produce outcomes that none of us could imagine by ourselves. This sums up how to get the best out of our cities. To be brave enough to consider the wider set of factors at the beginning of design. To actively look for the opportunities which come from urban constraints, as was so beautifully managed on the V&A Exhibition Road project. Enabling the best use of our space and the resources that make it great means putting people at the heart of the design process, to generate opportunities rather than be driven by compliance. It's not a new concept. Bazalgette's embankment demonstrates this so well, but we can all benefit from really refocusing back on this because it really, really matters. And there's a clear business case for designing places for people. It enhances the long-term viability of our assets. If they're loved and embraced by all, they'll be more successful, more used, and better looked after. And the benefits to this are obvious and have been discussed here, from the health and well-being to community building, through to return on investment. So I and all of us here are really passionate about continuous and proactive collaboration that's stimulated by these complex conditions to imagine the new. And I believe thinking like this is key to realising the best city for everyone. So thank you all very much.
It's really good this morning. I've really enjoyed the approach that Arup took to it in terms of using it as a storytelling adventure, and so to hear all the mix of different scales of projects that are at a very large scale, right down to the detail of an individual project, considering the material impacts associated with that project. So it's very inspiring to take a trip through history as well, to look at the history of King's Cross and the gas holders there and how that's now been developed and moved forward, and how actually you can reuse buildings in an innovative way to face some of the challenges and meet some of the challenges that we face today in the construction industry.
So I found it really fascinating. It's my first Green Sky Thinking event. I'm fairly new in the industry, so it's great to see like the depth of experience and the variety of projects that people are working on. I loved all of it, but I thought one of the really interesting things was what you're doing at Television Centre and how you've protected that really historic thing for the public for the future. And I think it's really nice that you can share those small stories which actually have a massive impact on how we experience these lovely buildings.
Well, Green Sky Thinking, I have to say, is an annual treat for me. Totally inspiring. The range of activities that Arup's involved with is so extensive, going from the intimate details of individual offices, which was important to me, right through to urban design and solving major issues. The key thing is nothing will stop us. This vision, this problem solving, this pulling people in to make the impossible happen. It's absolutely fantastic. And of course it's so accessible. It's all done through a medium of storytelling, and so I could tell you about most of the talks actually, and it has been truly inspiring.